Males live most of their lives all alone. The youngsters, however, need constant care and their mother's fearless protection. Bears are the largest hunters on land. Some weigh almost a ton. But this predator's physical power is fortified by intelligence, a combination that's worthy of unqualified respect. Tensions mount as two restless grizzlies wait for the big salmon run. But the horde that they count on has yet to invade the streams of Kodiak Island. This is an emotional species, and tempers can flare over a choice fishing spot. Though size usually determines status, it isn't always an easy call. Or some individuals may simply be overbearing. The injuries of an assault can prove fatal, so an actual battle is the last resort. But these males are merely play fighting, a harmless amusement that offsets impatience. Like two sumo wrestlers, they grasp and they clench, contesting each other's great bulk. They're playful, they're complex, and deceptively strong. But their enormous size hinges on a bounty of salmon. The salmon may appear self-destructive. They hurl themselves into the rapids time after time. They'll be rewarded, if the spawning ground is reached, by their own demise. Unless they meet their death beforehand, in the mouth of a waiting predator. Endowed with a remarkably good sense of nutrition, these bears can take full advantage of the island's plentiful resources. After their hunger subsides, grizzlies consume only the parts of a salmon that are the most nourishing. They prefer the head, and especially the fat-rich skin. Nothing, however, goes to waste. Discarded portions are also salvaged by the younger adults, who hesitate to capture salmon if an older bear is present. Status, whether someone else's or one's own, is understood by every species feeding on the fish. A bear of any age is instantly deferred to. By and large, the food supply is distributed with complete efficiency. Almost always. pristine peaks of Kodiak Island, at the western extreme of Alaska's Great Gulf. On a map, the island looks insignificant, a chunk of land sheared from the coastline by the force of a glacier roughly 10,000 years ago. But Kodiak Island is the home of giants, a race of the brown bear that towers over the rest. Mainland grizzlies are the exact same species, but only 2/3 as large. When the winter sets in and food becomes scarce, the Kodiak grizzlies head for the slopes to den until the famine is over. Each bear will have to live off the fuel its body has stored, a layer of fat that can be more than 10 inches thick. But the bear will lose about 2 pounds a day. By the time denning is over, a Kodiak may have lost half of its body weight. To conserve calories, it goes to sleep. But this is not the deep sleep of true hibernation. A bear can quickly wake up in case it has to escape from an intruder, like a half-starved wolf. Even when dormant, the bear stays alert, using its nose to detect any danger. And all the while, anticipating the arrival of spring. At the lower elevations, the intense grip of winter loosens by late April. The survivors collect their rewards. Caribou graze on young shoots of grass. And bald eagles return from the coast to fish the inland lakes. For the red fox, hunting comes easier now that mice and voles are no longer hidden under deep snow. Nourished by snowmelt and sun, the earth regains its vigor. Along the slopes, amid the snow, newly opened eyes discover a world revealed by light. A male recently out of his den must start to search for food. He relies on his nose and surefire memory to unearth anything edible. A mother's first priority is to protect her cubs. She tests the air for any danger that may lurk out of sight. Winter is slow to leave the slopes, delaying new vegetation. The male must descend to the distant valley in order to find food. But the young sow heads for higher ground. Up here, her cubs will be safer, especially the runt of the litter, which uncharacteristically clings to its mother's back. Cubs are most vulnerable in the spring, during the mating season. As long as a sow is producing milk, she remains infertile. But if, for some reason, her cubs were to die, her milk would quickly stop, and she would become fertile again, in prime condition for mating. This might explain why breeding males will kill the cubs they encounter, and why some mothers climb higher to avoid a confrontation. Down on the valley floor, another mother is taking her chances, while her cubs hum as they nurse. Because this sow is older, she's quite a bit bigger, and she's had more experience. Full-grown males can be twice as large, but many mothers discover that fury often makes up for size, and that giants can be intimidated. But not every time. The male that killed her will return to gradually consume her. And if by chance her cubs escaped, they're unlikely to make it without her. This recently orphaned yearling might have a slim chance, but the prospects are rather grim. More than 40% of young grizzlies die during their first 18 months, from predation, hunting, accidents, and starvation. Cubs are usually weaned when they're about 5 months old, but they continue to need their mother for at least a year or two to teach them survival skills. Even this roughhousing, called play fighting, teaches cubs techniques of aggression and self-protection. Play fighting continues throughout adulthood as a social ritual. It differs from outright aggression only by the degree of intensity. Without a mother's guidance, too much is left to chance, and life is too complex, too perilous, for them to survive solely by trial and error. The species' intelligence, a combination of memory and curiosity, requires early guidance. When they're not playing, the Kodiaks are foraging and feeding. Though omnivores, the young learn to be selective and to recognize the best sources of sugars and protein on which their nutrition depends. Its mother would have taught this cub which plants to eat and which to avoid. Now the orphan has to risk the perils of trial and error. These two youngsters have advantages. But in nature, there are no guarantees, nor is there any sympathy for the disadvantaged. The moist air of spring invades the valleys of Kodiak Island. Slopes have been reclaimed by the grass and garnished with lupin. From a high crag, the young mother keeps watch. She must protect her cubs from the males who would kill them in order to trigger her fertility. By July, the urge to mate will be over. Then a mother will be given wide berth. For now, the sow chooses exile. This far north, the time of abundance is all too brief. So throughout the warm months, the bears feast on flowering plants whose protein levels are at a peak. Entire days may be spent consuming as much as possible, with occasional time out for play between a mother and her young. Time of splendor in the grass, when life seems serene and ideal. But even on a perfect day in spring, life is never entirely safe. She picks up his scent long before he's in sight. The mother's response is typical of a bear's behavior. She chooses the strategy of avoidance. These Kodiaks have been abandoned. Though a sow will risk her life to protect her young, when it's time to breed again, she simply kicks them out. After 2 or 3, sometimes even 4 years of complete devotion. Initially quite traumatized, siblings often stay together for at least a little while. But the day comes when a bear must face an unfriendly world all alone. While some young bears suffer only brief despair, others wander aimlessly. A few actively seek adoption, or at least some temporary relief from the stress of loneliness. It's not surprising that the brown bear is considered an emotional species. Though heaven may be high and remote, it seems a little closer here at the height of spring. With the mating season winding down, a female watches two young males awkwardly engage in battle for her favor. She is simply not impressed. If the contest were in earnest, between two experienced adults of equal size, it could be a battle to the death. Despite all the posturing, the sexual charade appears to fizzle out, without having changed this female's mind in the slightest. Then she realizes the two males don't know when to quit, sniffing where she lay instead of leaving. She's convinced these males are not a good investment by their poor performance and small size, so she squats. And keeps squatting. They can nibble and cajole, even huff and puff, but to no avail. The sow foils all advances just by sitting down, but the suitor still goes through the motions in pantomime, practicing perhaps for another mating season. Dramatic weather intensifies the rough-hewn beauty of Alaska. A sweep of epic landscapes sculpted by the elements. Above the expanse of now lush meadows, the calls of distant ptarmigan. Closer to the valley floor, white-tailed deer stalk across thick blankets of wild flowers. The spring is peaked by the end of June, and the next phase of Kodiak life unfolds. The grizzlies have lost their urge to mate, and mothers have stopped nursing their cubs. Sensing instinctively that her little ones are now in less danger, the young sow descends. To her distress, she finds that her favorite fishing spot is occupied. Perhaps another sow would turn around and leave, since there's no shortage of space along the stream. But bears vary quite a bit in temperament, and this one could just be stubborn. The accidental trespasser sits. A show of submission in this case, but the mother is not looking for displays of passivity. She wants the young male out of there and nothing less. It may seem odd that after several months of caution, exile, and evasive action, the sow would now risk endangering her cubs. But beyond the mating season, showdowns are mostly a matter of posturing. Before a conflict becomes life-threatening, somebody usually backs off. The sow moves towards her cubs, just in case. She then decides that his retreat is insufficient. Surprisingly, the sow moves away this time. She checks the cubs before resuming. The back and forth between aggression and withdrawal reveals the mother's dilemma. She's probably torn between her own assertiveness and the instinct to protect her cubs. Why the final confrontation proved decisive may escape our scrutiny, but it was understood by those involved. Had the male been large and defiant, it's likely that the sow would have acted differently. For the sake of her cubs, a mother plays it safe. Though the personalities of individuals may vary, passing on one's genes is the overriding universal drive, even among the salmon. The sockeye are responding to the same impulse that prompts every sow with cubs and every breeding male. The drive, despite the obstacles, to advance the individual's genetic heritage. Farther up the stream, the young male that the sow evicted now crosses paths with a red fox. He pauses a while to play with a stick. Snorkeling helps him locate the stick, just as it will help locate the salmon swimming in deep water. Though this may have served as practice, bears often spend their time playing just for the fun of it. Unlike the assertive sow, the fox steers clear. And not only because of size. In nature, competition most often occurs among members of the same species, whether it's for mates, or food, or territory. Crossing rapids can be difficult and dangerous, for an injury could lead to a slow death. But when strength alone cannot ensure survival, a bear has the benefit of an amazing memory that keeps it from making the same mistake twice. The grizzlies of Kodiak Island may be the top predators, but each bear must face a wide variety of obstacles and challenges. Sometimes even challengers. Bears can live for more than 30 years, and they continue to learn from experience to the end of their lives. But the more a cub can gain before it's on its own, the better chance it has of making it. This family is waiting for the onslaught of the salmon. The glaucous-winged gulls also wait, knowing from their past experience that the presence of bears promises food. By example, the sow has taught her youngsters to face downstream when fishing for salmon. But there's no action. Leading her family away, the sow encounters a situation beyond the scope of a bear's intelligence. She doesn't anticipate the impact of rushing water thrusting against a body smaller than her own. In addition to the rapids, the little bear must now avoid the advances of a stranger. But its mother charges forward to intervene. Reunited, but traumatized, the yearling tries to nurse, even though it was weaned last spring. The sow may be protective, but she is not indulgent. Not a salmon in sight. Willing to wait no longer, the family again negotiates the rapids. But an important lesson has not been forgotten. Kodiak grizzlies who see their second summer are still not adept at hunting, but they have learned to salvage scraps. Weight gain is visible by July, but much more eating must be done in the next few months. To maintain good nutrition, the bears alternate their diet of salmon with vegetation such as sedges and salmon berries. While the summer abundance may seem like a luxury, it is, in fact, essential to the grizzlies of Kodiak Island. It's equally important to some smaller residents, who will also have to face the long and oppressive season of shortages. Catching fish in different terrains requires different strategies. In the open shallows, chasing prey is more effective than standing in one spot, which works better at the rapids. But this sow is merely waiting for the coast to clear. The cubs are led downstream, steered in the direction of the next big salmon run. In the meantime, there may be some more stragglers to catch. If their mother is to go off chasing fish, the cubs must not be left alone, where they would be conspicuous to a wolf. Her cubs will be safer in the grass, and now that they've been weaned, they can eat the plants, while the sow looks for prey. Though still within sight, the cubs are not accustomed to their mother being away from their side. But they soon resort to play, perhaps to relieve their distress. Having had some luck, the mother returns with fish to share. But first, they must find a spot where the sow can safely feed her young and get some rest. Autumn seems to blow in all at once, raking grasses heavy with the seeds of next year's spring. The bears are heavy too. The insects have lived out their lives, The migrants have gone south, and the hours of daylight keep dwindling down. At the lake, life itself dwindles for the sockeye, predators propelled toward their own death as they perpetuate their own kind. A few brief years of life, then they are replaced. A salmon's life seems very short for such an arduous ordeal, but the species as a whole succeeds. As the last run of salmon nears its destination and its destiny, a gathering of bears awaits, a related group of females and their young. Older youngsters who may be abandoned come next spring are now fishing for themselves. Unfortunately for the fish, a beginner's clumsiness does not provide a quick and painless death. Though she mated months ago, this sow will not bear young if she fails to gain sufficient weight before denning. Pregnancy is under nutritional control because an undernourished mother would starve to death if she had cubs to nurse. But without them, the sow may survive the winter to breed again in spring. The average adult consumes 30 pounds a day, though a 1,600-pound giant can eat more than 80 pounds when there's plenty of prey. But regardless of appearances, this isn't gluttony. It's essential for surviving the coming months. The young, however, are focused on the here and now. It's up to the adults to initiate departure. This little bear, quite stuffed and bored, tries to amuse itself while waiting for the grown-ups to decide when they've had enough. Many bears will not abandon the pursuit of salmon until they're certain that their efforts are useless. This is especially true of the young adults, who were pushed aside earlier on by older males and sows with cubs. Unfortunately, their reluctance to give up is not enough to assure their survival. As winter descends the slopes, other hunters, like the eagles, may turn to scavenging. The newly hatched salmon are far too small, but there are some leftovers. Soon, the eagles will depart to fish along the coast. But once the present food supply has completely vanished, the Kodiak bears must start their slow retreat. Sometimes, even if the food has not yet disappeared, weather gives the signal to start heading for the higher ground. Some families may be returning to a den site that's been used for generations, a link through time passed down from mothers to daughters. It's the young male who must break new ground. Initially forced out by his mother, then by the older males, he must find a region farther off if he's to prevail. The hardships are considerable. The time of opportunity is brief. But for each and every individual, survival is a constant test. Sometimes made more bearable by a little sleep.